What is up, guys? Jeff here with Lift to Thrive, and this is week 2 of my 6-week powerlifting prep. So officially 4 weeks out, 4 weeks to go, and this was a bit of an interesting week. Last week finished on a lot of intensity, a lot of fatigue. It was a culmination of 11 weeks of base building and then a sort of a mock meet, but really just testing out some singles, and then a normal 5-day training week after that. So 6 training sessions where I started ramping up all of my intensity, pulling back a little bit of the volume, but there was already an accumulation of fatigue. So at the end of last week, I was starting to feel a lot of tightness in my hips and lower back, and knew that I needed to start pulling back a little bit of fatigue. So it was essentially after Saturday's deadlifts, and then this is squats a couple days later. I went relatively conservative with these squats, but after this, I knew it was going to be a progressive deload for the rest of the week. So let's dive into it. Started off with some squats here, and these are my competition squats. Now I've got knee sleeve and belts on, and this was just a single on my way up at 465, moved very smoothly. And what I noticed is as I was bracing with the belt, that was allowing me to not feel the tightness in my lower back as much, but it was a little bit finicky, meaning I felt like if I got out of position that it was going to create a little bit more pain or discomfort, or the walkout felt a little bit shakier. But that last set was 525 and it moved relatively smoothly. So bumped up here to 555 pounds. And this was 15 pounds heavier than the previous week. Even though I was going into this more fatigued this week than last week, I was still able to add 15 pounds. And I think I had a little more in the tank last week, a little less in the tank this week, but I was able to add that 15 pounds. And I just capped it there because it was allowing me to ramp up in intensity, but make sure I didn't do anything that was going to get me hurt. Then I did a back off set, and I'm going to be doing 2 back off sets with these squats over the next several weeks, and just trying to add a little bit of work here. So this is 535, and the goal literally was 1 to 3, and I just did 1. So I stuck with 1, wanted to hit that weight, but wanted to match the right intensity. And then this is 500 pounds, and it moved pretty smoothly. In fact, it probably moved smoother than it felt. I just did 2 reps here, but the goal here is between 2 and 5. So that 535 is 1 to 3, and the 500 is 2 to 5. And I will be trying to add a little bit to that over the next couple weeks before I start my final taper. So ideally, we can keep ramping that up. And I think if I took this deload properly, and which I think I did, I think things will go smoothly. So after that, moved into some kind of snatch variations here. I'm doing some panda pulls, which I haven't quite figured out how to express it the way I'd like to quite yet. But the panda pull is where you move into triple extension with the snatch, ankles, knees, and hips. But then once the bar starts its upward trajectory, you pull yourself down a little bit, as if you're going to do your third pull of a snatch, but then you just bounce back. And that's the cadence of the panda pull. They're getting smoother, but there's some things I want to work on with my knee extension. Then moved on from there to some clean primers. Here are some tall cleans. Tall cleans are a great way to focus on pulling under the bar quickly, focus on keeping the bar close to the body. And then I move into some pause jerks, which allows me to really hone in on those positions, and then finish with a little bit of hang, clean, and jerk, which allows me to sort of express that a bit more. And that was it for that day. I didn't do anything past the primers, and then we moved on to day 2 here, and I still was feeling pretty good with the upper body, so I wanted to push the intensity a little bit, and so I did not quite start the deload for the upper body. That was 379 for 2, and then this was 409 for a single here. So moving pretty smoothly. This is probably the most consistently I've been doing over 400 pounds, and I'm pretty much hitting over 400 every single training session, which is pretty solid. And then after that, we went for a new 3-rep max of 386 pounds, and it was a bit of a grinder. The second one moved smoothly, but this 3rd rep definitely started getting pretty challenging, but just stayed composed, focused on pushing the biceps together, which I like as a cue for chest and tricep engagement, and that moved pretty well. Then from here, I moved on to a following back off set. This was 355, and I was aiming for a new 6-rep max and I just decided not to do it. I just was like, I didn't quite hit. It just felt like I hit a wall, and so I decided to call it there. I'm trying not to have any more failed reps leading into the competition, because a failed rep really just gives you an outsized return of fatigue versus stimulus. So playing it a bit more conservative there. And that was pretty much it for that day. And then we moved on to this, which is day 3, and some more bench press. So while I was a bit conservative there, the following day, I actually just went for it on the warm up and was able to hit a new 6 rep max. So this is 355 for 6, and I'm officially done with the 6 rep range. Now that I'm finishing that prep for the competition, it's lower and lower reps. So that was my last attempt for a 6 rep max, and I was happy to get that. Then did the smooth single at 405, and actually decided to get a little more amped up for this next one, because this moved smoother and was a new 1 rep max. So that was 425 pounds, felt pretty good. Then went for 406 and was contemplating a double before I started it, and that moved super slow, so I decided not to do a double, just kind of capped it off with a single there. And that was it for that day. Again, it was just bench press. So that was 2 days of just bench press, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday I did a full rest. Now, I was still moving the lower body a little bit, doing some goblet squats, doing some kettlebell sumo deadlifts. Really just wanted to move the hips around with super sub-maximum work. And I find that's a great way to actually recover, is don't do a full complete rest where you don't do anything with the targeted area. Instead, do something that would be a warm-up for that, and then don't do the work afterwards. I was doing some foam rolling for the hips, some light goblet squats, and some kettlebell sumo deadlifts, and some dumbbell Romanian deadlifts, very light, just focusing on hinging and moving the body so I can get everything accustomed to firing well again together. But then I came in after a full rest day on Thursday and wanted to rebuild back into some deadlift work and see how everything's going. Now, this was a perfect opportunity because I also wanted to work on my hook grip. I actually think that some of the extra accumulated fatigue that I was developing in the hips and the lower back was from doing my over-under grip at heavy weights, which I hadn't done in a while, and from doing multiple reps with straps, allowing the bar to bounce laterally a little bit, and then going for it anyways and rushing the setup. So this was an opportunity to focus on my deload, reduce some of the top end weight and stress, and focus on my hook grip and really dial in hook grip so I can use that for the competition in a few more weeks. I also happened to have set up my gym a little bit. I was moving some stuff around, so this technically was a deficit, but I said, you know what, let's stick with it so I can focus on position and hook grip anyways. So I was able to build up here pretty smoothly, just doing small jumps so I can get my hook grip accustomed to each jump, and none of it felt like a big leap from one weight to the other. None of it felt surprising. Everything was moving smoothly. That was 529. I finished here with this 551 and was actually really happy with the grip overall. It didn't feel light by any means, but the grip felt pretty secure, and I was able to do that in a small deficit that you saw there, and it was able to do it pain-free, which was great. So it was a sub-maximum deadlift session that allowed me to work on the skill of my position, my hook grip, and peel off a little bit of that fatigue that had been accumulating. Moved on to some high bar squats, and these I went pretty conservative with. I was finding that with the belt, I was able to brace, and it was able to actually eliminate any discomfort. But without a belt, I was still feeling some of the axial loading when I would pick up the bar. So I just worked up to this single of 418 for a high bar beltless sleeveless squat. This was great. Getting into a good position, leave it sub-maximally, nothing feels worse or anything like that, but keep that stimulus there. And that was it for that session. So that was the Friday session, and then Saturday came in, back to some bench press, and at this point I was feeling the accumulated fatigue on bench press and was thinking, all right, I don't need to do a full deload, but I need to be taking a little bit more of a sub-maximum approach into this following week. That way we don't get something that is irritated. So that was 405 for a single there, and then while you can't see it, this was 415, and was really happy with the pause, the position, and the hold. Was really stoked with that. Dropped back down to 406, and I did want to do this for a double. I went for it and got a little bit too cheeky, but don't worry, we know how to fail here, and was able to set it on the lower racks that I have there and leave there unscathed. Bit of an interesting week. Started reducing quite a bit of the overall lower body fatigue and stimulus, pulled out a lot of the weightlifting movements, pulled out a lot of the higher intensity deadlifts and squats, stayed lighter overall with that, but I ramped up the bench press quite a bit. And going into this next week, I'm going to be conservatively starting to ramp up the lower body movements again and conservatively pulling back the bench press a little bit, really just matching them. So if this week was a deload and this week was an overload with bench press, coming here, I'm going into a more moderate intensity week. So it's not a light week by any means, but it's not me trying to push things a little bit too far, especially at this point towards the competition. It's really about starting to express everything. When it comes to bench press, honestly, I just want to hit 424 at the competition because that'll be a competition PR, and I just hit 425 in training. And I do feel like there's a little bit more in the tank, especially once I start fully tapering and dissipating that fatigue. So I'm not really going to be pushing much more than 415, 420-ish before the competition. Now it's just about keeping that strength there, pulling back some of the fatigue. That way I can express myself the best when it comes to the competition. When it comes to the deadlift and the squat, those I'm still ramping up a little bit, and then I'm going to do a final taper the week or week and a half before. So stay tuned. It's Tuesday right now, so I actually know how Monday and Tuesday have already gone training-wise, and they're going well. So stay tuned for that, and I'll be posting that at the end of the week.